The stars burned cold in the void as Admiral Kreeth stood on the bridge of his flagship. His crystalline body caught the light from distant suns, throwing rainbow patterns across the metal walls. Behind him, 1,000 Velkoth warriors worked, at their stations. Their movements were perfect. Every action matched exactly with the others. They moved like one giant mind controlling many bodies. Kreeth looked at the view screen. Below them, the planet Xerion spun slowly. Its blue oceans and green lands looked peaceful. But peace would not last long. The Velkoth Empire had come to claim another world. All ships report status, Kreeth commanded. His voice echoed through the communication channels to every vessel in his fleet. 200 ships floated in perfect formation around Xerion. Each ship was exactly where it should be. No mistakes, no disorder. This was how the Velkoth fought wars. "Admiral," said Commander Vextar, stepping forward. "The planet's defense fleet has been destroyed. 15 ships. They lasted 12 minutes. Kreeth nodded. 12 minutes was longer than most. The aliens of Xerion had tried to fight. They had small, fast ships with energy weapons. But speed meant nothing when facing the Velkoth. Organization always won against chaos. "Open communication channels to all inhabited worlds in this sector," Kreeth ordered. "It is time for another lesson." The main screen changed. Instead of showing Xerion, it now displayed dozens of alien faces, bird-like Syrians with bright feathers, nautiloids with their large wet eyes, Chitauri with their insect features. All of them looked afraid. Fear was good. Fear made surrender easier. Kreeth walked closer to the screen. His crystal shell reflected the lights, making him appear even more frightening. "I am Admiral Kreeth of the Velkoth Empire. You have witnessed the fall of Xerion. This is what happens to worlds that resist us." One of the Syrian leaders spoke up. His feathers were shaking. "Admiral, please. Our worlds pose no threat to your empire. We are peaceful traders. We have families, children." "Your weakness is noted," Kreeth interrupted. "The Velkoth Empire does not negotiate with the weak. We are the perfect warriors. We evolved for war while you evolved for trade and art and other useless things. No species in this galaxy understands warfare like we do." The Admiral moved to the center of the bridge. Every Velkoth warrior stopped, working, and turned to face him. They all moved at exactly the same time. It was beautiful and terrifying. "Look at us," Kreeth continued, spreading his arms wide. "We think as one mind. We move as one body. We fight as one weapon. When we attack, every shot is perfectly aimed. Every ship moves to the right place at the right time. We do not make mistakes because we do not think like individuals. We are evolution's answer to war itself." A nautiloid representative tried to speak. "Admiral, surely we can reach some agreement. Our worlds have resources. We can trade." "You still do not understand," Kreeth said, his voice growing harder. "We do not want your resources. We want your submission. The galaxy will belong to the Velkoth Empire because we are the only species that truly commands war. Submit now, and your people will live as our servants. Resist, and they will join the void." The communication ended. Kreeth had made his point. Soon the surrender messages would begin arriving. They always did. Meanwhile, far beyond the edge of the Andorian sector, a small human ship drifted through space. The UES Busan was not a warship. It was a research vessel, designed to study new star systems and look for planets that humans might one day call home. Its crew of 35 people had been traveling for 8 months, mapping unknown regions of the galaxy. Captain Lee Minho sat in his command chair, reading reports from his science teams. At 42 years old, he had spent most of his adult life in space. He had gray hair starting to show at his temples, and kind eyes that had seen many wonders among the stars. But today something was different. "Captain," called Lieutenant Kim Daeho from the communication station. "I'm picking up a transmission. It's being broadcast on all frequencies." Minho looked up from his datapad. "From where?" "The Andorian sector, sir. About 15 light years. From our position." "Put it on the main screen." The bridge of the Busan was small compared to military vessels. Only 6 people worked there during normal shifts. Besides Minho and Daeho, there was Ensign Park Nari at the science station, Lieutenant Commander Yoon Jiwoo at engineering controls, and 2 junior officers managing navigation and sensors. The transmission began playing. Everyone on the bridge watched as the crystal-covered alien appeared on their screen. They listened to Admiral Kreeth's words about perfect warriors and submission. They saw the fear in the alien representatives' faces. When the transmission ended, the bridge was quiet for a long moment. "Has Earth ever made contact with any of these species?" asked Park Nari. She was young, only 26, and this was her first deep space mission. "No," Minho replied. "We've never traveled this far into the galactic core before. These are all first contacts for humanity." Yoon Jiwoo spoke from her engineering station. "Captain, should we move away from this sector? If these Velkoth are as dangerous as they claim." "No," Minho said firmly. "We need more information. Daeho, can you intercept any other communications from that area?" Lieutenant Daeho worked at his controls for several minutes. His face grew more serious as he found more signals. "Sir, I'm reading multiple surrender transmissions. At least 6 different species have agreed to Velkoth terms in the last hour." "What kind of terms?" Minho asked. "Complete submission, surrender of all military forces, Velkoth governors to be placed on all major worlds." Daeho paused, reading more data. "Captain, it looks like this empire has conquered 15 star systems in just 3 months." Park Nari turned from her science station. "Sir, I'm detecting weapon signatures from the battle near Zarion. The Velkoth ships use coordinated energy beams and kinetic missiles. Their tactics appear to be based on overwhelming numerical superiority and perfect timing." "Perfect timing," Minho repeated thoughtfully. "That suggests they plan every move in advance." "Yes, sir. The attack patterns show no variation, no improvisation. Everything follows preset formations." Commander Yoon Jiwoo stood up from her station. She was the oldest member of the bridge crew at 51 and had served in the Earth Navy before joining the Exploration Service. "Captain, with respect, this isn't our fight. We're explorers, not soldiers." Minho nodded. "You're right, Commander. But we may be the only humans in this region of space. Earth needs to know what's happening out here." "Sir," Daeho interrupted, "I'm receiving another transmission. This one is directed specifically at us." Everyone turned to look at the communication officer. "At us?" Minho asked. "How is that possible?" "Unknown, sir. But it's definitely targeted at our position and using our communication protocols." "Put it through." The screen showed a different alien this time. This one had blue-green scales and large, intelligent eyes. The creature looked exhausted and afraid. "Unknown vessel," the alien said. "This is Governor Thessian of the Zarian colony. We detected your ship on our long-range sensors before." The alien's voice broke for a moment. "Before our world fell. If you can hear this message, please send word to any spacefaring civilizations you know. Tell them about the Velkoth. Tell them what happened here. They claim to command war itself, and no one has found a way to stop them." The transmission ended with coordinates for several refugee ships that had escaped Xarian's destruction. "Captain." Minho stood up and walked to the main viewing port. Outside, the stars looked the same as always. But he knew that somewhere among those distant lights, an empire was growing. An empire that believed it had mastered warfare. "Nari," he said without turning around, "analyze everything we've intercepted about Velkoth military tactics. I want a complete report." "Yes, sir." "Daeho, contact those refugee ships. If any survivors are willing to talk, I want to hear their stories." "Understood, Captain." "Jiwoo, plot a course back toward Earth space. Maximum sustainable speed." The engineering commander looked surprised. "Sir, that will take us 11 months at best." Minho turned back to face his crew. "Then we better send a priority message ahead of us. Earth Fleet Command needs to know about the Velkoth Empire. They need to know about species that claim to command war." "What should the message say, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Daeho. Minho thought for a moment. He looked again at the screen where Governor Thessian's desperate face had appeared. He thought about the fear in the alien representatives' voices. He considered the cold confidence of Admiral Creeth. Tell Earth Command that we've discovered a military empire that has conquered 15 star systems using superior tactics and organization. Tell them the Velkoth believe they are the galaxy's perfect warriors. And tell them... Minho paused. Tell them that these aliens have never encountered humans before. Over the next few hours, the crew of the Busan worked to gather as much information as possible. They contacted 3 refugee ships and spoke with survivors from different worlds. The stories were all similar. The Velkoth would arrive with overwhelming numbers. They would demonstrate their perfect coordination and tactical superiority. Then they would offer terms: surrender or die. Most species surrendered. The few that chose to fight were destroyed quickly and efficiently. The Velkoth never seemed to lose ships in these battles. Their formations were too perfect. Their Tia. 6 days after Captain Lee Minho sent his message, Admiral Choi Hyunwoo sat in his office on Luna Station, reading the transmission for the 3rd time. Rain fell against the massive viewing windows that looked out over the lunar surface. Earth hung in the black sky like a blue marble, peaceful and beautiful. But the Admiral's mind was not on peaceful things. Hyunwoo was 63 years old and had commanded Earth Fleet for 8 years. His gray hair was cut short in military style, and his dark eyes showed the weight of many difficult decisions. He had fought in the Martian independence wars 15 years ago. He had seen what happened when humans went to war. Now, apparently, war might be coming to them. "Computer, connect me to General Nam Soo-jin and Dr. Kang Min-ji," he said aloud. Within minutes, 2 figures appeared on his holographic display. General Nam Soo-jin was at the Marine Training Center on Europa. She was younger than Hyunwoo, only 45, but she had more actual combat experience than anyone else in Earth's military. Her black hair was pulled back tightly, and her uniform was perfect as always. Dr. Kang Min-ji appeared from her laboratory on Earth. At 38, she was the leading expert on alien biology and psychology. She had studied every form of life humans had encountered in their expansion into space. Her workspace behind her was filled with star charts and biological data displays. "You've both read Captain Minho's report?" Admiral Hyunwoo asked. "Yes, sir," General Soo-jin replied immediately. "The Velkoth Empire represents a clear threat to human expansion and potentially to Earth itself." Dr. Min-ji nodded more slowly. "Admiral, the psychological profile is concerning. These Velkoth appear to have evolved as a hive mind species. Individual creativity has been replaced by collective coordination. That makes them extremely effective at conventional warfare." "Conventional warfare," Hyunwoo repeated. "What about unconventional warfare?" "That's harder to assess without more data," Dr. Min-ji said. "But hive mind species typically have difficulty adapting to unexpected situations. They plan perfectly, but they don't improvise well." General Soo-jin leaned forward. "Admiral, I recommend immediate military deployment to the Andorian sector. We should assess the threat level directly and potentially make contact with surviving allied species." "With what forces?" Hyunwoo asked. "Our nearest ships are months away from that region. The Sol is completing its shakedown cruise in the Centauri system," Soo-jin replied. "Captain Shin Taehyung's crew has been training on the new quantum weapon systems. The ship could reach the Andorian sector in 3 weeks. Dr. Min-ji looked concerned. "General, sending one ship against an empire that has conquered 40 worlds seems exactly like something humans would do," Soo-jin interrupted. "Doctor, with respect, you study aliens. I study war. These Velkoth have been successful because they fight predictable enemies with predictable tactics. They've never faced humans." Admiral Hyunwoo had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke. "Dr. Min-ji, in your opinion, what would happen if we tried to negotiate with this empire? Based on the psychological profile, negotiation would be seen as weakness. The Velkoth appear to believe that military superiority is the only meaningful form of communication. They would likely demand immediate surrender. And if we surrendered, humanity would become a servant species. Our creativity and independence would be seen as dangerous. They would probably try to change our society to match their hive mind structure." General Soo-jin made a sound of disgust. That will never happen. Then we're looking at eventual conflict, Hyunwoo said. The question is whether we engage now on our terms or wait for them to find Earth. The three leaders sat in silence for a moment. Outside the Admiral's window, Earth continued its slow rotation. Somewhere on that blue world, 3 billion humans lived their lives. Most of them had never heard of the Velkoth Empire. Most of them had no idea that their future might depend on decisions made in the next few hours. Tell me about the Soul, Admiral Hyunwoo said finally. General Soo-jin straightened. It's our most advanced battleship. Quantum torpedo systems, adaptive AI targeting, enhanced shielding. But more importantly, Captain Tae-hyung's crew represents our best tactical thinking. How? So? They're trained in asymmetric warfare. Instead of fighting like every other species, formations, predetermined tactics, standard procedures, they're taught to improvise. Every simulation they run is different. Every battle plan changes based on real-time conditions. Dr. Minji looked interested. That sounds like the opposite of Velkoth methodology. Exactly, Soo-jin said. The Velkoth perfect their tactics by repetition. Humans perfect their tactics by variation. Admiral Hyunwoo stood up and walked to his window. Earth looked so peaceful from here. If we send the Soul, what would their mission be? Initially reconnaissance, General Soo-jin replied. Assess Velkoth capabilities, make contact with refugee populations, gather intelligence. And if they're discovered? Then Captain Tae-hyung improvises. The Admiral turned back to face the holographic displays. Dr. Minji, what's your assessment of the risks? High, Admiral, but the alternative may be worse. If the Velkoth continue expanding, they will eventually reach human space. When that happens, they'll arrive with the combined resources of hundreds of conquered worlds. Better to face them now, while they only control 40 worlds? Better to face them before they know we exist. Admiral Hyunwoo made his decision. General Soo-jin, contact Captain Tae-hyung. The Soul is to depart for the Andorian sector immediately. Mission parameters, gather intelligence, assess threat level, and... He paused. And demonstrate human capabilities if necessary. Understood, sir. Dr. Minji, I want a complete xenological profile of the Velkoth sent to the Soul. Everything we can deduce from Captain Minho's data. I'll have it ready within 12 hours. 2 days later, Captain Shin Tae-hyung stood on the bridge of the UES Soul as it prepared to depart Centauri Station. He was 35 years old and had been commanding starships for 6 years. Unlike many military officers, he had studied history and philosophy before joining the Navy. He believed that understanding why humans fought was more important than understanding how they fought. The Soul was beautiful and deadly. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with lines that seemed to flow like water frozen in motion. The ship was 800 meters long and carried a crew of 200, but it was not the size that made it special. It was the technology and the people who used it. All stations report ready, Captain, said Commander Ojina, his first officer. She was 32 and had served with Tae-hyung for 3 years. They worked together like dancers who had practiced the same routine many times. Engineering reports quantum drive ready for jump, called Lieutenant Han Wubin from the weapons station. He was only 28 but had top scores in every tactical simulation Earth fleet had ever created. Navigation has our course laid in, reported Chief Petty Officer Lim So-young. She managed the Soul's shield and sensor systems with an expertise that bordered on instinctive. Marines are secured for departure, added Sergeant Major Bae Dong-yun over the communication system. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Captain Tae-hyung looked around his bridge. These were good people. Smart people. People who could think for themselves and work together without losing their individuality. The Velkoth had never faced anything like them. Take us out, Chief Lim. The Soul moved away from Centauri Station like a shadow sliding across the stars. Within an hour, they were far enough from the star's gravity well to engage their quantum drive. Jump in 3, 2, 1, engage. Space twisted around them, and the Soul vanished from the Centauri system. During the 3-week journey to The Andorian sector, the crew studied everything Earth Command had learned about the Velkoth Empire. They ran simulations based on the tactical data Captain Minho had gathered. They practiced scenarios that conventional military doctrine said were impossible. Dr. Minji's xenological report made for interesting reading. The Velkoth had evolved on a world where cooperation was necessary for survival. Over millions of years, they had developed a collective consciousness that allowed perfect coordination between individuals. This made them incredibly effective at large-scale operations, but it also made them vulnerable in ways they didn't realize. The key insight, Captain Taehyung explained to his senior staff during a briefing, is that they can't think outside their established patterns. When we watch their battle recordings, every engagement follows the same basic structure. They arrive in formation. They demonstrate overwhelming superiority. They offer surrender terms. If the terms are refused, they attack with predetermined tactics. What happens if we don't follow their script? Asked Commander Ojina. That's what we're going to find out. Lieutenant Han Wubin was studying weapon data on his personal tablet. Captain, their ships appear to be heavily armed, but not particularly well shielded. They rely on not being hit rather than surviving hits. Meaning, their tactics assume they can control the range and timing of combat. If someone forced them into close-range fighting, they might not be prepared for it. Taehyung finished. Good observation, what else? Chief Lim So-young spoke up. Sir, their communication systems seem to be constantly active. They coordinate everything in real time. If we could disrupt those communications, the soul dropped out of quantum space at the edge of the Zirion system, like a ghost materializing from the void. Captain Shin Taehyung stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display update with new information. What he saw made his jaw tighten. 200 Velkoth ships hung in perfect formation around the planet Zirion. Their crystalline hulls caught the light from the system's star, creating a spectacular display of reflected rainbows. It would have been beautiful if it weren't so menacing. Sensor sweep complete, Captain, reported Chief Lim So-young. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Velkoth fleet. They appear to be preparing for a final planetary bombardment. Any signs of the planet's defenders? Asked Commander Ojina. Negative. The orbital defense platforms have been destroyed. I'm detecting debris from approximately 15 ships in decaying orbits. Captain Taehyung studied the display. The Velkoth formation was exactly what Dr. Minji's report had predicted. Ships arranged in precise geometric patterns, each vessel maintaining perfect distance from its neighbors. No wasted movement, no redundancy. It was militarily efficient and completely predictable. Lieutenant Wubin, analysis of their weapons systems? The young tactical officer worked at his station for several minutes before responding. Sir, they're using coordinated energy beams and kinetic missile systems. The interesting thing is that every ship fires at exactly the same moment. They're not targeting individual threats. They're creating overlapping fields of destruction. Overlapping fields, Taehyung repeated thoughtfully. That suggests they expect their enemies to maintain formation as well. Yes, sir. Their tactics assume the enemy will fight conventionally. Sergeant Major Bae Donghyun's voice came over the communication system from the marine deck. Captain, are we going to help the people on that planet? Taehyung looked at the planet on his screen. Zirion was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. Somewhere down there, millions of beings were waiting to discover their fate. The Velkoth would either accept their surrender or destroy their civilization. That's exactly what we're going to do, Sergeant Major, but not in the way they expect. The captain turned to his crew. All right, people. We're about to make first contact with a species that believes it commands war itself. They've never lost a battle. They've never encountered resistance they couldn't overcome. Today that changes. Sir, Commander Ojina said quietly, there are 200 of them and one of us, which means they'll underestimate us. Taehyung smiled grimly. Chief Lim, take us closer. I want to decloak right in the middle of their formation. Sir? Chief Lim looked surprised. That would put us in weapons range of 50 ships simultaneously. Exactly. They won't expect anyone to be that aggressive. Their perfect formation becomes a trap if we're already inside it. The Soul moved forward under its cloaking field. The advanced stealth system was one of humanity's most closely guarded technologies. It didn't just hide the ship from sensors. It made it functionally invisible until the crew chose to reveal themselves. As they approached the Velkoth fleet, Captain Tae-hyung opened a channel to all stations. "This is the captain. In approximately 5 minutes, we're going to announce humanity's presence to the galaxy. Every one of you represents 3 billion humans who have never backed down from a fight. Show these aliens what that means." The Soul slipped between the Velkoth ships like a shadow moving through a crystal garden. The alien vessels maintained their perfect spacing, unaware that a human warship was now positioned at the exact center of their formation. "We're in position, Captain," Chief Lim reported. "Decloak us." The Soul suddenly appeared on every Velkoth sensor screen simultaneously. Admiral Kreeth, who had been reviewing surrender terms from 3 more species, looked up in shock as his officers reported the impossible. "Admiral," called one of his subordinates, "an unknown vessel has appeared inside our formation." "Impossible. Our sensors monitor all space within 10 light hours. Nothing could approach without detection." "Sir, it's right there." The Velkoth officer pointed at the tactical display. A sleek, dark ship hung in space exactly where their formation was weakest. Admiral Kreeth studied the new vessel. Its design was unlike anything in Velkoth databases. The hull seemed to flow like liquid metal, and the weapon emplacements were positioned in patterns that made no tactical sense according to established military doctrine. "Scan the ship. Identify its species and capabilities." "Sir, the scanning is being blocked. The vessel appears to be using some form of adaptive shielding." "Then we will ask them directly." Admiral Kreeth activated the fleet-wide communication system. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Velkoth space during military operations. Identify yourself and state your intentions." On the Soul's bridge, Captain Tae-hyung received the transmission. The Admiral's crystalline features appeared on the main screen, and his voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had never been challenged. "Captain," Commander Ojina said quietly, 200 ships have us targeted." "Let them." Tae-hyung stepped forward and activated the communication system. "Admiral Kreeth, I presume. This is Captain Shin Tae-hyung of the United Earthship Soul. You have threatened peaceful civilizations under the protection of the Terran Federation. Withdraw your forces or face the consequences." The bridge of Admiral Kreeth's flagship fell, silent. Every Velkoth officer turned to stare at their admiral. No species had ever spoken to them this way. No single ship had ever demanded that the entire Velkoth fleet withdraw. Admiral Kreeth began to laugh. The sound was like grinding crystal, sharp and unpleasant. "Captain Tae-hyung, you command 1 ship. I command 200. You are surrounded and outnumbered. Surrender immediately and your crew will be allowed to live as servants of the Empire." "Admiral," Captain Tae-hyung replied calmly, "you misunderstand the situation. You may command 200 ships, but I command something more valuable." "And what is that?" "Chaos." Before Admiral Kreeth could respond, the Soul opened fire. But not in any pattern the Velkoth had ever seen. Lieutenant Wubin targeted 3 ships simultaneously with quantum torpedoes that moved in curved paths instead of straight lines. Chief Lim activated the Soul's special maneuvering systems, causing the ship to spin and dive in directions that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The Velkoth formation, designed for perfect coordination, became a liability as ships found themselves firing at positions where the Soul no longer was. "Impossible," Admiral Kreeth breathed as he watched the human ship dance between his vessels, like a leaf caught in a hurricane. "How are they moving like that?" "Admiral," one of his officers reported, "the enemy ship's movements don't follow any known tactical doctrine. They appear to be improvising their maneuvers in real time." Improvising? The concept was alien to Velkoth thinking. Ships cannot improvise. Tactics must be calculated and coordinated. But the Soul continued to prove him wrong. Captain Tae-hyung's crew worked together with a fluid creativity that the Velkoth couldn't comprehend. Each officer anticipated what the others would do, but not because they were following a predetermined plan. They were responding to the battle as it developed, adapting their tactics moment by moment. Chief Lim, bring us around to bearing 270. Lieutenant Wubin, target their communication array on the flagship. Sir, that will put us directly between 15 enemy ships. I'm counting on it. The Soul spun through space, using the Velkoth, ships themselves as cover. Admiral Kreeth found himself in the impossible position of being unable to fire at the human ship without hitting his own vessels. All ships, modify formation to Pattern 7, he commanded. But Pattern 7 was designed for fighting enemies who stayed in predictable positions. The Soul was already moving to a new location before the Velkoth ships could complete their repositioning. Lieutenant Wubin fired a series of quantum torpedoes that struck the flagship's communication array. Suddenly, Admiral Kreeth's perfect coordination began to break down. Individual Velkoth captains, cut off from the hive mind's guidance, hesitated for crucial seconds before acting. Captain, Commander Ojina reported, their response time is increasing. Without constant communication, they're having trouble coordinating. Exactly what we hoped for. Sergeant Major Bay, are your teams ready? Yes, sir. Marine boarding parties standing by. Deploy. The Soul launched a series of small craft that moved like angry wasps toward the nearest Velkoth ships. But these weren't conventional boarding shuttles. They were equipped with the same adaptive technology as the Soul itself, making them nearly impossible to target effectively. Sergeant Major Bei Dong-yun led the first boarding team onto a Velkoth cruiser. What they found surprised them. The ship's interior was like a crystal maze, beautiful but sterile. The Velkoth crew moved with mechanical precision, but when confronted with opponents who didn't follow established patterns, they seemed confused. These aliens fight like robots, Bei reported over his communication link. They know exactly what to do against conventional boarding parties. But we're not conventional. Instead of trying to capture the ship, Bei's teams planted explosive charges on critical systems and retreated. When the charges detonated, the Velkoth cruiser was disabled but not destroyed. It would survive, but it was no longer part of the battle. Admiral, one of Kreeth's officers. Admiral Kreeth stared at the human captain on his communication screen. The crystal formations on his head reflected the emergency lighting from his bridge, creating sharp patterns of red and orange. Around him, his officers worked frantically to assess the damage from the Soul's unexpected attack. Terms? Kreeth's voice carried a mixture of anger and confusion. You speak of terms after attacking a superior fleet? This is not how warfare is conducted. Captain Taehyung remained calm. Admiral, you're right. This isn't how warfare is usually conducted. But then again, you've never fought humans before. Humans. Kreeth said the word like he was tasting something bitter. Your species designation was not in our databases. Where do you come from? A place where we learned that the best way to win a war is to change the rules while you're fighting it. Kreeth cut the communication and turned to his tactical officers. Status report. Admiral, we have suffered damage to 17 vessels. The enemy ship appears to be using weapons technology we have never encountered. Their torpedoes can change direction during flight. And their movements? Completely unpredictable, sir. Our targeting computers cannot calculate firing solutions, because the enemy ship never maintains course or speed for more than 30 seconds. Kreeth moved to the central command platform. Around him, the bridge crew waited for orders. For 800 years, the Velkoth had perfected the art of coordinated warfare. Every battle followed established patterns. Every victory came through superior organization and overwhelming force. But these humans seemed to ignore every principle of proper military conduct. Admiral, another officer reported, long-range sensors show additional ships approaching from multiple vectors. More human vessels? Unknown, sir. The sensor signatures are chaotic. On the Soul's bridge, Captain Taehyung received a priority communication from Chief Lim. Captain, I'm detecting Governor Thessian's refugee fleet approaching from the outer system. 47 ships of various types. Perfect timing. Taehyung said. Open a channel to all refugee ships. Governor Thessian's face appeared on a secondary screen. The alien leader looked exhausted but hopeful. Captain Taehyung, we came as quickly as we could, but our ships are not military vessels. How can we help? Governor, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. Can your ships maintain formation? Yes, but don't maintain formation. I need you to fly like you're trying to escape in 47 different directions. Governor Thessian looked confused. Captain, that would create complete chaos in local space. Exactly. What happened? Next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for decades to come. The refugee fleet scattered across the Xerion system like seeds thrown into a hurricane. Each ship chose its own course, its own speed, its own destination. To the Velkoth sensors, it looked like random panic. But Captain Taehyung saw opportunity. In the chaos. Lieutenant Wubin, are you tracking the refugee ships? Yes, sir. 47 vessels on completely independent courses. Use them. The Soul suddenly accelerated toward the nearest refugee ship, a cargo vessel that was fleeing toward the system's outer planets. To Admiral Kreeth, it appeared that the human warship was pursuing helpless civilians. All ships, intercept the enemy vessel, Kreeth commanded. Protect the civilian craft. It was exactly what Captain Taehyung had hoped for. The Velkoth fleet broke their perfect formation to chase the Soul, spreading themselves across thousands of kilometers of space as they tried to catch a ship that seemed to dart between the refugee vessels like a fish swimming through coral. But the Soul wasn't just running. Every time it passed close to a refugee ship, Lieutenant Wubin launched quantum torpedoes that used the civilian vessel's mass to mask their signatures. By the time the Velkoth ships detected the incoming weapons, the torpedoes were already too close to intercept. Impossible, breathed one of Kreeth's tactical officers as he watched another wave of perfectly coordinated missiles appear from seemingly empty space. How are they launching weapons from civilian ships? They're not, Kreeth realized with growing horror. They're using the civilian ships to hide their weapons until the last moment. But sir, that would require individual targeting calculations for each torpedo based on the random movements of 47 different ships. Exactly. Kreeth finally understood what they were facing. These humans don't think like us. They don't plan like us. They improvise solutions faster than we can adapt to them. The Soul continued its deadly dance through the refugee fleet. Chief Lim pushed the ship's maneuvering systems beyond their design limits, spinning and diving through three-dimensional space in patterns that seemed to defy physics. The Velkoth ships, trained to fight in orderly formations, found themselves scattered across the system, unable to coordinate their attacks. Captain, Commander Ojina reported, Velkoth ships are starting to collide with each other. They're so focused on tracking us that they're not watching their formation spacing. Their greatest strength becomes their greatest weakness, Captain Taehyung observed. They've trained so hard to move together that they've forgotten how to think independently. Sergeant Major Bae Donghyun's voice came over the communication system. Captain, my teams are ready for Phase 2. Deploy. The Soul launched a dozen small craft that scattered in different directions. To the Velkoth, it looked like the human ship was abandoning escape pods. Several Velkoth vessels moved to intercept what they assumed were helpless survivors. Instead, they found Sergeant Major Bae and his Marines. The human boarding craft were unlike anything in the Velkoth databases. They moved like living things, changing direction and speed without warning. When they attached to Velkoth ships, they didn't follow standard boarding procedures. Bae's teams had studied the Velkoth ship designs during the journey to Xerion. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum disruption with minimum effort. Instead of fighting their way to the bridge or engine room, they targeted communication relays and coordination computers. Remember, Bae told his teams over their tactical network, we're not here to capture ships, we're here to break their ability to work together. The Marines planted charges on critical systems and retreated before the Velkoth defenders could organize a proper response. Within minutes, a dozen Velkoth ships found themselves cut off from their fleet's coordination network. Admiral Kreeth watched his perfect fleet dissolve into chaos. Ships that had moved in harmony for centuries suddenly found themselves operating independently. Captains who had never made tactical decisions without consulting the hive mind hesitated at critical moments. "Sir," one of his officers reported, "we're losing communication with ships across the fleet. The human boarding parties are targeting our coordination systems." "Then we adapt," Kreith said grimly. "All ships switch to independent operations. Each captain will engage the enemy using their own judgment." But that command revealed the Velkoth's fatal weakness. Individual Velkoth captains had never learned to think creatively. They had been trained to execute perfect coordinated attacks, not to improvise solutions to unexpected problems. As the Velkoth ships began operating independently, their effectiveness dropped dramatically. They still outnumbered the Sol 200 to 1, but they no longer fought like a unified force. They fought like 200 individual ships, each trying to apply the same tactical solutions to a problem that demanded constant adaptation. Captain Taehyung watched the Velkoth fleet's coordination collapse and knew it was time for the final phase of his plan. "Chief Lim, take us directly at their flagship, maximum speed." "Sir, that's Admiral Kreith's command vessel. It's the most heavily armed ship in their fleet, which is exactly why they won't expect us to attack it head-on." The Sol turned toward the massive Velkoth flagship and accelerated to combat speed. Every sensor in the fleet tracked the human ship as it approached what appeared to be certain destruction. Admiral Kreith smiled for the first time since the battle began. Finally, they make a conventional tactical decision. All ships converge. On the flagship, we will destroy them when they attempt their attack. But Captain Taehyung had no intention of attacking the flagship conventionally. "Lieutenant Wubin, prepare all quantum torpedoes for simultaneous launch. Target every ship that moves to intercept us." "Sir, that's over 50 ships. We don't have enough torpedoes for individual targeting." "We don't need individual targeting, we need area saturation." The Sol fired every torpedo it carried in a single massive volley, but instead of targeting specific ships, the torpedoes were programmed to detonate in a pattern that would create overlapping energy fields throughout the space around the flagship. The Velkoth ships moving to intercept the Sol suddenly found themselves flying through a minefield of quantum explosions. Their perfect formation, designed to maximize firepower and minimize vulnerability, became a death trap as energy cascaded from ship to ship. "All ships, scatter," Admiral Kreith commanded, but it was too late. The quantum field created by the Sol's torpedoes was disrupting the energy flows through his ship's crystalline hulls. Systems failed across the fleet as the aliens' own technology turned against them. In the chaos of the quantum field, the Sol did something that no Velkoth tactician could have predicted. Instead of pressing its attack on the damaged ships, 2 weeks after the Battle of Xerion, news of humanity's victory had spread across the galaxy faster than quantum communication networks could carry it. In the council chambers of a dozen different species, alien leaders gathered around holographic displays showing the impossible: the mighty Velkoth Empire, defeated by a single human ship. On the bridge of the Sol, Captain Shin Taehyung read the latest diplomatic messages flooding in from across known space. The Syrian Confederacy had sent 3 separate requests for military alliance discussions. The Nautiloid Republic was offering trade agreements and requesting human military advisors. Even species that had never made contact with anyone were suddenly broadcasting their coordinates and asking for human protection. "Captain," Commander Ojina said, looking up from her communication station, "we're receiving another priority message from Admiral Kreith. He's requesting permission to come aboard." Captain Taehyung set down his datapad and looked at the tactical display. The Velkoth fleet had spent the last 2 weeks in emergency repairs, their perfect formation replaced by chaotic clusters of damaged ships. More than half their vessels were still only partially operational. "Has he explained why he wants to meet face-to-face?" "No, sir. But the message indicates he's willing to come alone, without escort." Lieutenant Han Wubin looked up from his weapons station. "Captain, that would be unprecedented. Velkoth commanders never leave their flagship during military operations. Then he must have something important to discuss." Taehyung made his decision. "Grant permission, but full security protocols. Sergeant Major Bay's teams will escort him from the shuttle bay." An hour later, Admiral Kreith stepped aboard the Sol for the first time. The Velkoth commander was even more impressive in person than he had appeared on communication screens. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the ship's lighting and threw prismatic patterns across the corridor walls. He moved with precise, measured steps that spoke of centuries of military discipline. Sergeant Major Bei Dongyun and 4 Marines escorted the alien admiral through the ship's corridors. Bei noticed that Kreeth observed everything with intense curiosity, studying the human ship's design and layout as if trying to solve a puzzle. Your vessel's internal architecture is chaotic, Kreeth observed as they walked. How so, Admiral? Bei asked. Velkoth ships are designed for maximum efficiency. Every corridor serves a specific purpose. Every room is positioned for optimal function. But your ship seems to have been designed by multiple minds working independently. Bei smiled slightly. Actually, Admiral, that's exactly how it was designed. Different teams of engineers working on different sections, then connecting them together. No single mind could have created something this complex. They entered the Soul's main conference room, where Captain Tae-hyung waited with his senior staff. The room was deliberately simple, with a large table surrounded by chairs that could accommodate various alien physiologies. The only decoration was a large viewing port that showed the stars beyond. Admiral Kreeth examined each human face carefully before taking his seat. Captain Tae-hyung, Commander Ojina, Lieutenant Woo-bin, Chief Lim So-young, and Sergeant Major Bei. 5 individuals who had somehow worked together to accomplish what entire civilizations had failed to do. Admiral, Captain Tae-hyung said formally, welcome aboard the Soul. May I ask what brings you here? Kreeth was quiet for a long moment, his crystalline features reflecting the starlight from the viewing port. Captain, in 800 years of Velkoth military history, no enemy has ever forced our fleet to retreat. No species has ever defeated our coordinated tactics. No single ship has ever survived combat against a full Velkoth battle group. And now, Tae-hyung asked, now I must understand how it was possible. Dr. Kang Minji's voice came over the communication system from Earth. She had been monitoring the meeting remotely, ready to provide xenobiological expertise if needed. Admiral Kreeth, if I may ask, how does your species normally learn about new military tactics? Kreeth turned toward the communication speaker. All knowledge is shared through the collective consciousness. When one Velkoth learns a new technique, all Velkoth learn it simultaneously. This allows us to perfect our strategies across the entire species. And that knowledge is coordinated centrally? Yes. Perfect coordination requires perfect information sharing. Captain Tae-hyung leaned forward. Admiral, may I show you something? At Tae-hyung's signal, Lieutenant Woo-bin activated a holographic display showing the Battle of Xerion from multiple perspectives. The humans watched as their own tactics played out in 3-dimensional detail. Tell me, Admiral, when you watch this battle, what do you see? Kreeth studied the display intently. I see chaos. Your ship's movements follow no established patterns. Your weapons fire appears random. Your coordination with the civilian vessels makes no tactical sense. And yet we won. Yes. Kreeth's voice carried a note of frustration. You won using techniques that should not work. Commander Ojina spoke up. Admiral, may I ask how Velkoth commanders are trained? We study every successful battle in our history. We memorize the optimal responses to every tactical situation. We practice until our coordination is perfect. And what happens when you encounter a situation that's not in your historical database? Kreeth was quiet for a moment. That has never happened before. Until now, Lieutenant Woo-bin said quietly. Chief Lim So-young activated another section of the holographic display. Admiral, watch this sequence where we use the refugee ships to mask our torpedo approach. How would Velkoth doctrine handle that situation? It would not occur, Kreeth replied immediately. Velkoth forces do not use civilian vessels in combat operations. It is inefficient and unpredictable. But if it did occur, we have no established response to such tactics. Captain Tae-hyung stood up and walked to the viewing port. Beyond, The transparent metal Zarian continued its slow rotation. Its people safe for now. Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We don't have a collective consciousness. Every person on this ship thinks independently. When we face a new problem, 200 different minds start working on 200 different solutions. That sounds inefficient. It is inefficient, it's also unstoppable. Taehyung turned back to face the Velkoth commander. Your species perfected coordination, Admiral. You can execute flawless, predetermined strategies. But when something unexpected happens, your entire military structure freezes while waiting for new orders from the collective. Whereas humans adapt. Every officer on this ship has the authority to make tactical decisions. When Lieutenant Wubin saw an opportunity to use the civilian ships as cover, he didn't wait for orders. When Chief Lim realized your formation was vulnerable to disruption, she acted immediately. When Sergeant Major Bay's teams found weak points in your ship designs, they exploited them without consulting a tactical database. Dr. Minji's voice came through the speakers again. Admiral, this represents a fundamental difference in military philosophy. The Velkoth way creates perfect soldiers who execute perfect plans. The human way creates imperfect soldiers who create perfect adaptation. Admiral Kreeth stood up and walked to the viewing port. His crystalline form reflected the stars, creating patterns of light that seemed to shift and change. Dr. Minji, Captain Taehyung, I must ask you something that may sound strange. Of course, Admiral. Could humans teach other species to fight this way? The question hung in the air like an unexploded quantum torpedo. Captain Taehyung exchanged glances with his officers before responding. Admiral, why would you want to learn human tactics? Because, Kreeth said quietly, the Velkoth Empire has conquered 40 worlds using our methods. But now we have discovered that our methods have limits. If we encounter other species that fight like humans, you would lose. Yes. The admission seemed to pain the proud alien commander. Captain, the Velkoth have never asked another species for help. But I must ask, would humans be willing to share their knowledge of warfare? Sergeant Major Bay spoke up. Admiral, human military doctrine isn't something you can just memorize and download to your collective consciousness. It requires individual creativity, independent thinking, and the ability to make decisions without consulting higher authority. That sounds like the opposite of everything the Velkoth represent, Commander Ojina observed. Exactly, Kreeth replied. And that is why we need to learn it. Captain Taehyung returned to his seat at the conference table. Admiral, are you suggesting that the Velkoth Empire wants to fundamentally change its military structure? I am suggesting that the Velkoth Empire wants to survive. We have encountered a form of warfare that we cannot counter using our current methods. Either we adapt, or we face eventual defeat by any species that learns to fight like humans. The implications of Kreeth's words were staggering. The most militarily successful empire in galactic history was asking for help from a species they had never heard of 2 weeks ago. There would be conditions, Captain Taehyung said carefully. What conditions? First, the Velkoth Empire ends, its expansion. No more conquered worlds. Kreeth nodded. Acceptable. Second, the worlds you've already conquered are given the option of independence or voluntary association. That would be difficult. Many of our subjects, Admiral, Dr. Minji's